Thank you, Donna. Now, I do have a warning for the timekeeper. I'm nearsighted and I'm a Baptist. So I might need something extra. No, I'm actually, this is 2018 now, and we're coming up close to one of the most important elections we'll ever see in our lifetime. And frankly, I'm a little tired of giving speeches. I do enjoy giving speeches because whenever I get up to speak, I try to represent everybody in the district. And there are a lot of people in our district, a lot of communities who have really desperate needs right now, who are in a lot of pain. And so I think about them when I get up to speak. But I think that it's time to move beyond speech and go to action. And so to that end, tonight I want to treat you to something. I bet every one of us, if you're like me, probably wakes up in the morning just hoping that our president will not do something awful again today. I don't know if you're tired of hearing about him, but I'm tired of hearing about him. Every minute of every day. Doesn't matter which station you turn to on the TV or on the radio, it's the same name over and over. So I'm tired of hearing about him on his own, but I'm also tired of hearing about him from the Democratic Party, frankly. Because if the Democrats think that they can run a country on opposition to one man, they're sorely mistaken. I'm afraid that if the Democrats continue to be obsessed only with Trump, although he does need to be resisted, if they do not have a plan of their own and a vision for where to take this country, they are going to be just as useless when they get to Congress as the Republicans have been, who ran for 8 years against one man over and over without a plan of their own. So tonight I'm going to treat you to a Trump-free speech. This is my vision, not because of who he is. He doesn't define who I am. He doesn't define who the Democratic Party is, or he shouldn't. But we have our own needs here in the 9th District. And this district went 80-20 for Trump. And if we spend all of our time complaining about Trump and everybody's already tired of hearing about him, then we are going to lose just as badly as we did last time. So I'd like to talk to you tonight a little bit about what my vision is for the future. Not just of the Democratic Party, but the future of this country. I've been thinking this week about my teaching career and some of the children that I've had the opportunity to meet. I've taught in poor schools. At the moment, I'm teaching in a very wealthy school, Riverside Military Academy. This has been my 3rd year there. But most of my time I've spent teaching children who live in poverty. And I say I've been teaching them, but really, since the beginning of my teaching career, my students have taught me more than I will ever teach them. This young English major coming out of UNG, I thought everybody is going to love poetry and Shakespeare just like I did when I was sitting in a college class. And my high school kids taught me very different, that they have quite a few things to worry about other than Shakespeare. I learned a lot my first year. I heard about families who had to make choices between medication and food. I heard stories from young men, angry, coming in the next day, who told me about getting kicked out of their home with their mom and having nowhere to go that night. So that's who I'm speaking for tonight. And those problems were there before the president ever got to the White House. And unless we do something as a Democratic Party and make bold steps to address the problems in our nation and offer a real alternative, we are going to keep losing ground right here in Georgia, all across the South, and all across the Midwest. So in thinking about my vision for the future, I often, as many of you may know, I'm a Sunday school teacher in Gainesville, Georgia. And I've been reading this week about the story of the birth of Moses. Now raise your hand if you've ever read about the birth of Moses before, how Moses was born. Great, awesome. Everybody knows what I'm talking about already. If you'll recall, Moses was born in an awful time. You had people living in a palace on top, doing no work, and you had a whole group of people doing all of the work for the country and doing everything that that country needed, feeding, building that country. And only the people up at the very top, the Pharaoh and his household, were able to appreciate and enjoy all of the work that went into the pyramids, that went into the farms on the Nile. But just as always, the people who were doing the work, just like anybody else, they had families and they started to grow. And the Pharaoh started to get worried. He said, the people of Israel are becoming great, a great and mighty nation. What will we do if they outnumber us? And so he said to the midwives, go to all of the newborn children born to the nation of Israel. Kill every male child that is born. Moses' parents, just like suffering people throughout history, were in desperation. They found a way. They made a little raft out of what they could find on the side of that marsh next to the Nile, papyrus. They placed their little 3-month-old child that they had kept in hiding for 3 months from Pharaoh and the death merchants. And they trusted their son, this newborn fragile life, to a little raft made of papyrus and mud. And of all people to find Moses, the family of Pharaoh, the daughters who went out to bathe in the Nile River, find this vulnerable, tender child, an infant, 3 months old. And it's so interesting to read the story because it says the Pharaoh's daughter had compassion on Moses. And she took pity on this newborn babe, even though she knew he was from the nation of Israel. And he grew up in that household, the best education, the best food, the best training. And what they didn't know was one day that baby would grow up and turn their empire upside down. I know a lot of parents who had to make their own raft of papyrus and mud, doing the best they could with what materials they had. I'll tell you one of my first memories. My mother, when I was born, had to work swing shift at Milliken Humphrey up on Currahee Mountain. Swing shift is not easy. You never get used to the hours you work. And every couple of weeks, every so many days, you have to get used to a new schedule. And of course, my mother, being a traditional Southern woman, was also in charge of cooking for 3 boys who were barely civilized, including myself, and taking care of the house. And one of my earliest memories was my mother carrying me out of that trailer that I grew up in, working swing shift to make sure that we had clothes. And if my mother didn't go to work, if she didn't do her best, then that check wasn't going to come. And my father, who saw when I was a child that my teeth were not good. My mother had taken a medicine when she was pregnant with me. They did not know at that time that it was bad for infants' teeth. So she took the medicine, and when I was born, my teeth came in abscessed. I was in a lot of pain all the time. But around Franklin County, there was hardly a place you could work to get good insurance. So my father, being a machinist, who was trained, thanks to a man named JFK, who did something to the region of Appalachia that we need to do once again, the Appalachian Project to build jobs and to teach people skills. My father learned, because of JFK, how to be a machinist. And so he went and got a job at Lockheed Martin because they had great dental insurance. And because of him, I can smile today without shame. My parents were building that raft out of the best materials they could find. And that's what we all do. Every time we bring a life into this world, we realize that nobody was ever born asking to come into this world. Nobody chose to be born into this world. Moses did not choose to be born in an oppressed group. African Americans in America do not choose to be born in communities where police suspect them, some police suspect them automatically of being guilty. Poor people do not choose to be born in this country without resources, without access to the best educational opportunities. Nobody in this whole world decides to be born, decides where to be born. But here we are. We can't decide what society we're born into. But just like Moses' parents and just like my parents and your parents, we can decide our future. We can decide, starting today, the society that we want our children and our grandchildren to be born into. Do not let them tell you it does no good to go out and vote or to go out and knock on doors. In the early 1900s, they told women, this is a conservative country. You will never get the right to vote here. And think about this, women didn't even have the right to vote, and they acquired the right to vote. It's astonishing to me to hear the hopelessness in some people in the resistance. They say, I keep trying, and we're making no difference. Well, I watched a conversation between a young black man in Mobile, Alabama, talking to a state patrolman or a National Guardsman, calling him the most vile language. And that young man stood up with dignity and love and fellowship and reached out to his enemy. And they faced a lot worse things than we're facing today. Much worse. I've been out marching to fight gun violence, to fight for LGBT rights, to fight for health care, and to fight for dreamers. And I have not had a single water hose turned on me. I haven't had the dogs turned on me. And if you look back and take inspiration at the people in this country who have been oppressed and who have fought their way out of oppression, I promise you, you will find the motivation and the inspiration to carry on today in these dark times. So what is the way forward? What do people in the 9th District need? Well, they don't need any more you-know-who. That's for sure. They get him every second of every day. First and foremost, what everybody needs, what you come into this world needing, is health care. I think it is wrong that anybody in this wealthiest nation in the history of the world should have to choose between life and livelihood. People's entire life savings, the sweat of their brow, the inheritance from their ancestors, are going into private insurance companies' pockets and hospital pockets. You get held up in an alley, your wallet or your life, they send that guy to jail. Somebody comes after you with a private insurance card, your money or your life, they get promotions and bonuses. We have got to end this profit system that feeds off of people's sickness and vulnerability. We need to make a way so that everybody in this country has access to life-saving health care for every American. Because do you know who is super against health care for everybody and we pay for his health care? His name is Doug Collins. He really thinks it's bad for government to pay for health care, unless it's for him and his family. Health care is an urgent need, and we need to fight every day. I don't think that anybody should die because they're poor, and I don't think anybody should be poor because they're dying. And I am ashamed to say that in 2018, I still have to say that. But that's my number one priority, Medicare for all. Number two, we have to be Democrats again. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt won this district, they told him, you know, Social Security, that's too bold. We'll never be able to take care of our elderly citizens, let them retire in dignity. It's too bold. They'll never let it pass. But the people are always ahead of the politicians. And he listened to the people. And that's what we've got to do. I don't care what color they are, what religion they are, what orientation they are. Everybody needs a good job. Everybody in this country needs a good job. And this is not my idea. Martin Luther King Jr. said that we ought to have a jobs program in this nation so that anybody who is out of a job, when that retail store goes out of business, out of their control, they go to work every day and work hard, and forces outside of their control put them out of a job, we need to make sure that they have access to a good job, because we have a lot of needs in this country. We don't need to make any work for anybody. Our engineers tell us that we are $2 trillion behind on infrastructure. And in 10 years, that will cost us $4 trillion because of the inefficiency in repairs. And I would like to hear the Democrats talk more about green infrastructure. What about a high-speed rail for every major city so that people in Elberton can build rails and railway cars so that people from Gainesville and from this area, from Athens and from Macon, can get into Atlanta? It'll be better for the climate and it'll be better for local jobs. We need to be bold as Democrats, and we need a new deal for the 21st century that reaches full employment. Because if we can do it in the middle of a Great Depression, reach full employment, we can do it with a $19 trillion economy. And finally, we need to focus on education, because the new world that is coming at us is going to come to us whether we like it or not. Change happens faster today than it's ever happened before. I can see what's happening in Syria within a second after it happens. Sometimes that's frightening. But we have got to, as progressives, embrace that change. And we've got to realize that we can actually get people an education and give them an opportunity to serve their country. Let's pull back on all these foreign military invasions, which we were promised we were going to do. Do you remember the presidential election? We were promised we were going to pull out of Afghanistan, and we just added more troops to Afghanistan. We have now spent more money rebuilding Afghanistan than we spent rebuilding Europe after World War II. So much of it has been wasted. They have built $1 billion worth of schools that they call ghost schools. Schools without teachers, without textbooks. Who knows what pockets that $1 billion went into? And we're saying we can't even fix the water in Flint? We can't get enough out of Afghanistan, but we can't get out of Puerto Rico fast enough? Patriotism is more than just an invasion of another country. Let me tell you what patriotism looks like. Let's make sure that every one of our neighbors in this country has a chance to go to school. And I'll tell you how. In the 1940s and 50s, they offered a GI Bill for World War II. Well, we have a lot of social needs in our country. Let's make a domestic service operation. I would like to revive the Civilian Conservation Corps so that every area that has social needs, look at these places like Detroit. Single mothers need daycare, and we have young people out of a job. Put them to work in domestic service and give them a domestic service GI Bill. 2 years of service, 2-year scholarship to a technical school. 4 years of service and a full ride 4-year scholarship to a university they get admitted to. This is education that they earn. We have got to find a way to value labor and to value life again in this country. That is my plan for the way forward. And we don't even have to talk about you-know-who to get there. Those needs were there before him, and unless the Democratic Party gets straight and starts focusing on the needs of the American people instead of an easy win in November talking about the scandals, we're going to be in the same place we are today in another 5 or 6 years. That's my vision for the future. Thank you for listening to me tonight, and for opening your hearts to me. I look forward to any questions you might have. I hope I didn't go over time like Baptists and nearsighted people tend to do.